Leaders become great, not because of their power, but their ability to empower others. John C. Maxwell said that once. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 33, Leadership Axioms with Steve Smith. Hey everybody, welcome to the Move Forward Leadership Podcast. It's your host and founder again, Scott McCarthy, here with another show. If this is your first time listening to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, welcome. Welcome to a podcast which is designed around one thing, and that's just helping you. Helping you become a better leader in everything you do in life. It doesn't matter if you're a family person at home or you're work in a corporation, or you work for a nonprofit, or you're an entrepreneur working in a small business. I don't care. I'm here to help you become a better leader. And with that, I'm bringing my 20 years worth of leadership experience and throwing it at the forefront. But this show isn't about me, mostly. Sometimes I do a solo show where I talk about things. But generally, I'm bringing in world-class experts and guests in various different fields, and we're discussing leadership and very specific leadership topics. So today's guest, Steve Smith, has his leadership axioms, which are basically leadership principles that you kind of have to lead your life through. I'll get into that a bit more, but first I want to talk about one thing regarding moving forward leadership, and that's we need your help. We need your help to, one, keep the show going, and two, make the show better, okay? It costs money. That's no news to you, I wouldn't think. But it does definitely cost money to keep world-class podcasts like this one running. So there is one way, if you're interested in supporting the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, there is one way to support us, and that's through the Patreon fund, okay? Patreon is a service which helps creators like myself and my team fund our projects. So if you go to Patreon, patreon.com/MFL_podcast. And again, this is all in the show notes, and you'll find the show notes at movingforwardleadership.com/podcast/Smith. So if you go to that link, what you're going to see there is a way to support the podcast. Now, I won't get into the nitty-gritty details, but there's basically 3 different sponsorship levels that you can go ahead. And it's not, you just handing me money. It's you get things in return as well. All the way up to monthly calls with myself. 30 minutes, leadership coaching, one-on-one. Why wouldn't you want that, right? So swing by there, have a look if you're interested in supporting the podcast, and sign up. Now, the money isn't going to go just in my pocket. Not a chance. No way. I got a list of projects about my arm lengths long of things I want to reinvest into the podcast. But I don't have the ability to just do it on my own time. So that is the plan, okay? So enough about me basically, I wouldn't say begging for money, but, requesting a little support for the podcast that you're listening to. Let's dive into talking about our guest today, Steve Smith. Steve, he has a long, extensive background. His background is he spent 30 years in the manufacturing business sector, and then eventually he decided to make a change. And good on him. Why wouldn't you after 30 years of doing something similar day in, day out? So he took all this experience that he gained with his time there in the manufacturing industry, and developed his company, Growth Source Coaching. And again, all Steve references, his website, his books, etc., will be all in the show notes. So he took his experience, turned it into his company, and now he is basically executive coach. So he trains executives in leadership and leadership practices. So it's pretty neat. Definitely some new insights in the world of leadership, and his thoughts and his foundations are definitely something to take in consideration. All right. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here's my interview with Steve Smith talking about his leadership axioms. Steve, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on.
Scott, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
As always, one of the first things I like to do with my guests is get them to give a background on who they are, how they got to where they're at today, so my audience just has an idea. So, you want to do enough for me before we really dive in?
Sure. I currently have my own business and executive coaching company. I've been doing that now for the last 10 years. Prior to that, I spent 30 years in the consumer products manufacturing industry. And, it's a huge industry. It entails a lot of different companies and products. But I was very fortunate in who I went to work with. And I started with General Mills, and they were a wonderful company and a great training ground. I spent a lot of years with Lysol Chemical. They were the company that actually moved me from New York out to California. I spent a little bit of time with a small pharmaceutical company that had a health and beauty care division. And the last company I was with before I stepped off that crazy train was the strangest company I'd ever worked for. They were the largest manufacturer in the world, based in Indiana, of burial caskets. Yeah, so I mean that was a real leap. That was a huge leap. I'm glad I did it. I learned a lot. I made some good friends. It was a worthwhile deal. But when it was time to go, I was glad.
Yeah, no doubt. That's quite a diverse experience for sure. So, how did you get about going down the whole coaching and executive coaching route?
After I left, and I always wanted to have my own business. And I had thought about this since I got out of high school, but met the love of my life and got married and needed to get on a solid career track, which were the companies that I just listed. But at the age of 52, I decided, now I have the bandwidth, I have the wherewithal, I have the experience to actually do my own thing. And the question was, what does your own thing look like? Mm-hmm. And I had help. I accidentally bumped into a lady that specializes in helping kind of career executives in certain industries figure out what is a great pairing of their skills and their experience with a business that they could run. And she was the one that introduced me to business coaching. I'd heard of executive coaching. Many of the companies I worked with, a lot of your C-level, director-level people had them off and on, but it wasn't an ordinary thing. And so when she came around and said, look, you're perfectly suited for this. This is what you need to get into. By that time, the industry had kind of mushroomed. And I was amazed at how many people were out there doing that in all sizes and shapes. And I did a lot of investigation, and I decided, this is where I need to jump in because this is where I can make a huge impact.
No, that's really neat. And yeah, it's really neat to see how you're all set up and run into that person and, kind of guide you that way. All things happen for a reason, as my wife likes to say.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, you sent me a copy of your book here, Leadership Axioms, which, again, thank you for doing so. It's much appreciated. So can you just give a bit of background on that, like how you developed this and how these different axioms, you were able to bring these about?
Well, first a little bit about the type of, and axioms for people who may have heard the word but don't really know what it means. It's well-worn principles. Mm-hmm. And over my career, I had worked with a lot of really great people and learned a lot. And so, kind of along the way, you pick up things. People say things, they tell you things. And I just started tucking them in the back of my head and thinking, okay, this is the kind of thing that I could build my presence around, the way I work, the way I deal with people and things. And so at one point, I decided I was going to write these down just in bullet point form and make a little pocket slide, something you could carry around with you and you refer to it every once in a while just to make sure you're on top of your game. And I started handing them out at some of the networking groups that I associate with today. And one guy was looking at it and he's going down the list. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah. And he's commenting and he looks at me and he says, you really ought to make a book out of this. And, I kind of let it slide because there was a couple of people at the table. And so I went home and I started thinking about it and I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to do this, I've got to do this in a way that meets the needs and the desires of today's business individual. And what I determined was that writing a 200 or 250 page book that kind of had a deep dive in each one of these things was probably not going to be the best use of my time or be the most effective with the people that I gave this book to. So I made the book that you have there, and I patterned it off of a very, very old book style that I actually grew up with, and it was called Reader's Digest.
Oh, yes.
I used to love that because they got right to the point, and they held your interest, but they didn't take forever to get there. And so I designed this book the exact same way because I wanted it to be something somebody could read in about 20 minutes and actually look at and say, wow, that principle there I can really work with. Or this one here is something that I've struggled with. And immediately get an impact that says I can go out and make a small change in how I operate, how I think, how I interface with other people, and get a huge benefit along the way if I incorporate that into my own style. So that's kind of how the book came about.
Yeah, no, it's a really neat, I'm literally flipping through the pages again here now. It's a really neat style and packaging, the way you've set it up. And it literally doesn't take that long to go through and quickly get what you're getting at and your principles or your axioms and your points you're trying to make. Like, I don't even think I remember how long it took me to clock how long it took me to read this thing, but it wasn't long at all. Actually, this podcast will probably end up being longer.
No, absolutely right. But that's okay because let's face it, technology has done wonderful things for our world today. But one of the things I think it's done is a disservice in it's caused us all to kind of live in a Facebook world with a Twitter vocabulary. So, we want to get things quickly. We want to absorb them. We want to move on. We want instant results. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of how society is today. So I really tried to kind of blend some real, deep thought content in a very, very quick delivery format.
No, that's definitely an interesting way to put it. I like to refer to it as the drive-through culture, right? You pull up, you make your order, and 30 seconds later, it's in your hand. You paid, and you're gone. And
that's right.
Instant gratification from that Big Mac, right?
That's right. Yeah. And everything you ever needed to know is a Google click away.
Oh, 100%. What do we have universities for anymore?
Right.
Anyway, we could totally go on a complete rabbit hole here, but let's try not to. What I'd like to do for the listeners out there is just go through. Obviously, we're not going to go through all of them because there is how many are there? 14 of them here. But what I'd like to do is have a discussion around about half dozen or so of them. So the first one I'm really interested in, I've done a podcast episode myself, solo episode of it myself. So I definitely want to get your take on is accountability and how you see that out there for the audience.
Okay. All right. Let me just okay. That was leadership axiom number 2.
Yeah. Number 2.
Okay. So basically the short answer to that, before it goes into a little more introspect, if you will, is the way I look at it is if you expect it, you have to be prepared to inspect it.
Yep.
and here's the thing on accountability. And I learned this a while back, but I never really gave it a lot of formal thought to where I could kind of capsulate it for people. Accountability is a very interesting human dynamic in that as we grow up, we learn from a very early age to be accountable to other people. When we're infants, we're accountable to our parents. We have to do what they say, or you end up spending all day in your room. You go to school, you become accountable to your teachers.
Mm-hmm.
You get your first job, you become accountable to your boss. At nowhere along that journey is there any real dynamic effort put behind teaching people to be accountable to themselves.
True story. Absolutely.
So when people get on a job, and especially in today's world where everybody wants autonomy and everybody wants to work in remote locations and they want to do their own thing, and a lot of managers have actually gotten paranoid over this, and they go to great lengths not to micromanage, even at the point of not managing at all. And so with all the people that I work with, one of the things I take a look at real quick is how well does your organization respond to your guidance, to your direction, to the goals that you've set for the company? Are they Are they getting things done on time? Are they coming back to you with results? Are they staying engaged in the whole communication process? Or do you find that you tell people to do something and you wait days, weeks, and you never hear anything about it, and all of a sudden they're on to something else because they've dropped the ball and it doesn't matter?
Yeah.
And so accountability, just like we talked about from the learning side, it is a learned behavior. And the only way to get people to understand that accountability is a continuous process is for you to make sure you go back and inspect what you expect them to do. And when you do that over and over again, they will eventually get the idea that this is not going away.
It's funny, when I arrived at my job here, I remember one of the first things that occurred was someone came to me like, oh, so-and-so is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm like, okay, great. Let's hold them accountable. They're like, okay, where do we start? I'm like, well, have you had a conversation with them? They're like, no. I'm like, so have you told them that they're doing something wrong? They're like, no. I'm just like,
yes,
right.
Yes. Yeah. Look, I mean, that's a well-worn path.
Oh, unfortunately, yeah. So it's like,
yeah, and look, there's a way to do that to where you don't look like the bad guy or the person that's just stifling everybody. There's an effective way to do that, and I've written about this. I've done videos on it because I really want people to get more engaged and feel confident that if they hold people accountable in a motivational, can-do kind of style, that they'll bring people along in that behavior tune-up much faster.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's always two sides to every situation, right? There's a negative side and positive side. And if you focus on the negative side of it, then that's why people are going to come out of, oh, I'm not doing my job right. I'm messing up, blah, blah, blah. Or or you go to the positive side and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not doing this right. But once we get on track here, things are going to get a heck of a lot better. The business is going to start booming, et cetera, right? So it's just the way you move towards and how you approach the subject is definitely delicate in my mind, for sure.
Right. But here's the interesting bottom line to this is if you go into most organizations and you ask people at various levels, what you're going to find out is they want to be held accountable. They want to do well. They want to learn. They want to develop, want to advance. And they know that they're not going to be able to do it on their own steam because, they're every year they say, gee, I'm going to drop 20 pounds. And by the end of January, they've gained 10.
It's funny because it's middle of Jan as we're recording this, folks.
Right.
So, I like it, and I think we could have a pretty lengthy discussion here on accountability itself. But what I'd like to do is, move forward here and go to number 4, and that is mindset time zone. And that was a very interesting way to put it when I read it. It was like mindset time zone. So can you just dive into that a little bit for us?
Sure. Here's like most time zones, and I'm not talking about, your time zone, East Coast versus mine, West Coast. In the mind, you only have 3, and it's the past, it's the present, and it's the future. And there are benefits to being in all of those 3. The problem is you have some people that dwell in the past, even when they're in the present. And when they're in a leadership role, if you're always in the past, it's very easy to figure that out because every reference you make is to something that happened a while back or happened years ago or happened in another life. And people, when they get that from leaders, what they very quickly realize is that the person's out of touch. They're not here in the real world, so we're just going to bide our time and maybe they'll get replaced. And so that's the effect of that's what cripples leadership when you spend too much time in the past. If you're going to be in the past, what you ought to be doing is learning from what you did, what the outcome was, and then moving on.
100%.
So then you have living in the present, and that's that's the most important thing because people know when you're in the present. You're engaged, you're listening, you're communicating, you're picking up body language, and all of those things tell people that you're here. And that's important because that's where everything happens. So if you're never present, then that's people will discount your authority, your leadership, your guidance because they just realize you're just not around. The future is that's the strategic thinking part. That's looking down the road, and leaders are tasked with always keeping an eye 1, 3, 5 miles down the road because they want to make sure they know what that looks like before everybody else shows up. But if you spend too much time thinking and living in the future, you become kind of aloof, and you're looked at as somebody who's a dreamer and who's not dealing in reality. And so that has negative consequences as well. So what I try to get people to do is say, look, learn from the past, live in the present, think in the future. If you can do that, you'll be really, really dynamic in the leadership role you happen to occupy.
No, that's I really like that. Learn from the past, live in the present, and look towards the future. That's so true. And I think, if we tie into last one there, what you almost need to do as a leader is have someone to hold you accountable to make sure you're not living, that you actually do learn from the past and you're present in the future, present in the present, and you don't spend too much time looking down the road, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So, I find myself, I can easily be just constantly looking forward as the leader of my organization, because I'm worried about what's coming down the pipe, what's coming, 5-6 months out from now, or a year or two, and occasionally I have my right hand man come in. It's like, okay, we got to deal with this right now today, and you're like, whoa, it actually takes you a minute or two to get out of that zone, right? And,
yes.
and get focused on what's happening right here, right now, after you've been looking towards the future for so long. So,
well, there's certain roles in any company where mindset dispositions might be an advantage. So if you've got a factory and you've got your operations manager that's overseeing what's going on in the factory, then living in the present, but kind of remembering the consequences of what happened in the past when certain things weren't doing right. That's a good combination for operating in the here and now.
Mm-hmm, for
you
sure.
wouldn't want anybody on the line or supervising a manufacturing line that was always thinking in the future and not paying attention to what was going on now. That could end in disaster. So a lot of times when you're looking at developing people in your organization, bringing them along, trying to get the right folks on the right seats in the bus, you really have to be thinking about what kind of mindset are they bringing with them, because that in large measure is going to determine how well they operate in that new role.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, for sure. That's great. So I'd like to move on to the next one, which is number 6, and probably one of my favorite topics to discuss in leadership, actually, and that's delegation.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of audience is probably tired of hearing me talk about delegation, but you know what? You can never have enough in my mind. So why don't you tell us about your point of view on delegation from this book?
Okay, so delegation, in my opinion, is one of the most coveted abilities that any leader can execute on. Sadly, many people don't use it enough. They don't use it right, and they don't use it enough. And so they end up getting saddled with a lot of things that they really shouldn't be doing. They should be overseeing and talking about, but they shouldn't be actively involved in, because they've either chosen subliminally or consciously not to give it out to somebody else. It could be some personal thing that they like doing, and so they always want to have their hands on it, or they just might think that their organization isn't capable. When what I've found in most cases when I'm inside helping people that run businesses, when we start looking at this, what I find is there's plenty of people around the business that can actually do it better than them.
Yeah.
But they choose to hold on to this stuff. So then you get them to the point where they finally realize, okay, I should be delegating. I'm paying all these people to do these wonderful things. I brought them into the company, and I'm not giving them the opportunity to live up to their full potential. So the next question is, well, how do you go about doing it? And that's where I have written in this axiom under delegation: assign responsibility to people who want to grow, not to people with space on their plates.
Yeah.
And I saw this happen a lot. And, you go to your best person who's already up to their eyeballs and stuff, and you say, hey, I need you to take this on because I trust you. I know you can get it done. And that person's looking at you like, my God, I have one plate and it's running all over my table. I don't have any other room for this. What am I going to let go in order to do this?
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to be saying, okay, if I'm going to give an important assignment or maybe a reoccurring thing to somebody in my organization, and they are the best person for it, and they're going to learn from it and develop from it, but their plate's full, then you sit down with them and say, okay, tell me what you want to take off your plate, and I'm going to give the low-end busy work to folks who've got spare time but no initiative.
Absolutely, right? Makes complete sense.
Juggling the work.
Mhm. As they say, the saying out there, and it's completely true. If you want to get something done, give it to someone who has a lot to do, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then you have to recognize there's a human consequence to loading your best people up, and if you do it chronically, it leads to burnout. And so you really want to make sure you reorganize stuff. And of course, the person on the bottom end of that food chain is going to say, well, why am I getting all the stuff that he doesn't want to do? And my pat answer is because you don't volunteer for anything, so I got to figure out how to keep you busy.
I love it. So true. So true. And a key component of that is just, and we skipped over the axiom that you have in the book, but it's communication, right? As long as you have that communicative culture where someone that you're giving all these tasks to can walk up to you and say, hey, you know what, my plate's full. You give me this extra thing, but I can't handle it. Something's got to go.
Yes.
Then that's going to work for sure.
Yes, and believe me when I tell you, employees of all sizes and shapes, most of the good ones get very good at reading their boss's inclinations. So if they know that you've got an open door policy and you'll chat about anything, you'll listen to their ideas. You may not always say yes to everything, but you're very open in terms of reception. Then you won't have a problem with that. If you're not necessarily an open individual and people know that, you may have to take the lead on saying to somebody, look, I want you to handle this. I know you're up to your eyeballs in work. Tell me what things are on your desk now that you would gladly give to somebody else, and I will reassign them.
No,
so
for sure.
Initiative for that.
And honestly, that can go both ways too, right? If you notice that your boss is up to his eyeballs or her eyeballs, and you got that spare capacity to do something, then say, hey, what can I take off your plate? What are you willing to delegate to me?
So there's a great aspect that didn't really make it into the book, but to me, if you really want to demonstrate that you can operate at a higher level, start doing that kind of stuff. Because I had a guy when I was with Lysol Chemical, he was one of my mentors, and he told me one time, he goes, before you can go to somebody and ask them to take on a higher role, you need to be operating at that level in your current job.
Yep.
When they see that, the first thing they're going to think is, "Oh my God, we need to make more out of this person because we're wasting that resource by having them operate here. We need to bring them up to there."
Yep, for sure. You don't want to get into that culture where you're basically promoting to incompetence, right? You want to have some proof that they can actually operate at that level.
Yes, absolutely.
That's going to be disastrous. But unfortunately, too many companies out there do that way. Oh, he does a really good job. Let's try him at the next level. Well, he may not perform that.
And the one discipline in many companies where that is just overwhelmingly a problem is they'll take somebody in the sales ranks who's really, really good selling, closing, numbers, and they'll say, "Wow, this guy's good. Let's make him the sales manager, and then he can teach everybody else."
Never happens.
No, it's just bad because the folks that are really, really good at sales, they pride themselves on individual accomplishment. Now you're going to put them in a role where what you really expect is team accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like oil and water.
And there's so many other factors to play there. Like, are they actually a good instructor or mentor or teacher, coach?
Yes. Are they willing to share what they know for the benefit of having other people potentially be able to do as well as them?
They may be good at being communicative with clients and prospective clients and whatnot, but how do they communicate with a team? Because those are two different things.
Yes.
So many out there. Oh, yeah. No, it's quite crazy how often you hear that. Oh, they perform so well at sales, and then they end up becoming the sales manager, and then their supervisor or the CEO or whatever, like, what the heck happened to this guy?
Yeah, and you know what? They get into those higher roles, and they may wash out. So now you still have an opening in a managerial role, and you've lost a good salesperson.
Yeah, because they're not going to stay within the company.
Right.
For sure.
Right. That usually damages them to the point where all they're interested in is finding a fresh start someplace else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it might be a competitor.
Well, yes, depending on the industry and what they know and what they're comfortable with, it usually ends up being a competitor.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to move on to number 10 now. And that's something which becomes a pet peeve of mine because I see how poorly gets done so often, and that's priority setting. And
Yes.
one of the things I personally come across often is that basically you get the inclination everything's a priority. It's like, this is a priority. Well, that's a priority. This is a priority. I'm like, okay, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
That's exactly right.
So I like to hear what your take on is from the book here.
Well, priorities are the absolute top end projects or initiatives that you would want to spend time on because it means the most to your organization. And so you really have to get good at separating what's truly important and meaningful from stuff that's just urgent. And urgent stuff tends to be kind of routine, low-level stuff that's been laying around for a while and nobody has recognized or done anything with it, and all of a sudden it becomes a problem. And so it's in your face, screaming for attention, and you now confuse urgent with important. And that's what happens. And people that have trouble with priority setting, the thing they run into is that they operate like the refrigerator list. Okay, every day I come in, I got to write out this long list of stuff, and if I get it all done, I can leave at the end of the day and say, wow, I had a really productive day. The problem is they're confusing the activity with a very low level of accomplishment.
That makes sense.
And so a lot of times what you do is sit down with people and help them learn how to go through their entire list of stuff. In fact, I have a system I teach business owners who have problems with this, and it's the 3-pile method. And I say, go through everything in your office on your desk. Some of these guys have piles on their floor.
Oh, man.
Take everything and put it in 3 piles. And here's the way the piles look. The first pile are absolutely important items that only you can handle, and they need to be done today or this week. So that's pile number 1.
Yep.
Pile number 2 are things that need to be handled between now and maybe the end of the month. But they could just as easily be handled by somebody else with your oversight. So that's pile number 2. Pile number 3 is everything else. Pile number 3 goes in the trash.
Love it.
And they'll say, well, what if there's something important there and they're like an invoice or a bill? Or I said, you know what? Have you ever missed an invoice and not had anybody follow up with you? No. That thing will show up as a second reminder. It'll show up as a friendly phone call, one of these robocalls that you get. It will always come back to you. You never really have to worry about throwing out junk. What you're really trying to do is level the playing field so your focus is on what's important for you to do and what's important for you to delegate.
That makes complete sense. And I would say it even goes as far as even your inbox. You can operate that way with your inbox, right? And that's something I've gotten recently much better at, is handling my email in a very similar priority system and managing how I receive my emails, how I organize them, and hand out tasks via email and stuff like that. And it makes complete sense. And you actually feel like weight is coming off your shoulders because now you can truly focus on what's important, right?
Yes. In fact, I just got done launching a new article that I wrote because I know, at the beginning of the year, everybody's concentrated on goal setting and things like this. And goal setting is important, don't get me wrong. But what I find all too often is after people go through the goal setting process, the whole thing comes to a halt. And so the whole idea of this article was move to the next phase, which is goal management.
Yep.
Because you don't want to get the football down to the 10-yard line and then pick it up and go to the locker room. And that's basically what happens. You want to get it over the goal line. So what does that require? And one of the things is taking a look at all the stuff that you're involved in as the leader of your group, as the owner of the company, and look at everything and say, okay, is this particular activity that's sitting in front of me, is this somehow attached or supportive of a major goal? And if it's not, then delegate it or get rid of it. But don't spend time on it if it's not going to lead you to accomplishing one of the major goals, which is pivotal to your company growing and prospering.
Makes complete sense for sure. Love it. I'd like to move on now to number 13, which is a very interesting one to me, and pursuing excellence, and what your thoughts were there in writing that one.
Okay. To me, if you consider yourself as somebody that is excellent in your business, in that profession, excellence is something, it's a mindset. Tony Robbins talks about this. It's not something you just turn off and on depending on what's sitting in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
You're oriented towards doing things at the level that they are needed or better all the time. And so the principle here is pursuing excellence. Do your best no matter how trivial the task. Because if you start learning how to kind of let things go, phone them in, do all the stuff that just gets it off your desk, and eventually that mindset creeps into the important stuff. And then you have trouble figuring out, oh, gee, it's going to take too long. Oh, this is too hard. Let me just do this and get to the next phase. Well, you go from phase 1 to phase 18, however big this project is, and at the end of the day, you look at the final results and it's mediocre because you've engaged in a series of less than excellent tasks and activities along the way. So the whole idea is if you're going to be excellent at what you do, adopt a state of mind that promotes excellence. And I draw a line between excellence and perfection. Perfection, to me, is a disease. You're never going to get there.
No.
You can deliver excellence.
I completely agree with that statement. It's just something, and a fact is, define perfection, right? You can actually define it via a dictionary term, but really in real life, what is perfect? And my argument is nothing is, because everybody has a different definition of what perfect is. So how can you get there, right?
And perfection is, to me, people's version of perfection is time-based. So it might be the absolute best, never to be replicated by anybody else in this moment. But in world of technology advancement, give it a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then things get blown out all the time. They get replaced. What's the favorite term everybody's using today? Disruption.
Yeah.
Disruption is the enemy of perfection, or perfection is the enemy of disruption, because just about the time you think it's so perfect it can't be, improved on, that's when somebody down the street with a quarter of your budget and half your experience is outperforming you.
It makes complete sense. So look at all the game changers that we can think of in the past. I would say 10 years or less, right? Like, good one. Yeah. That's good. A good example close to my heart is iPhone and more, and Google Android taking down BlackBerry and completely basically kicking them out of the cell phone realm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because they got completely complacent and thought they had the perfect device and got really comfortable. And all of a sudden, new software, new technology came along, and no longer are they a cell phone manufacturer, but they're more of a cybersecurity firm.
Right. And so as a leader, you've really got to look at being able to live and perform on a regular basis above the waterline. Mm-hmm. In that margin where people can say, that person really does it well. Mm-hmm. They didn't do it perfectly, but they really do it well. And when you can live there, you will establish yourself as somebody to be emulated, somebody to be followed, somebody to be looked up to. And to me, that's the pinnacle of leadership, when everybody around you just instantly does what you need them to do, because they recognize the end is going to be good.
Mm. So when you're writing this, was there any thought in the back of your mind for pursuing excellence about, continued growth, constant learning as a leader?
Yes. And I've changed my thoughts on that over the years as well, because logically, if you look at leadership and just personal and professional development as a series of steps, you're always moving up. If you look at it that, at some point you reach a pinnacle where there's nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. And so what I've recognized, and it kind of happened with me when I got out of the consumer products industry, I was starting over again. And I know a lot of people today that would never have done that, because the idea of starting over again was just so reprehensible in their own mind that they would just want to live in the past but live at the peak.
Yeah.
And so for me, practicing that thing of truly being excellent is, even when you start over, even when you open up a new chapter in your career or your life, how well can you develop that for whatever amount of time you're in it?
Yeah, makes sense. For sure. Love it. Uh, so one last one I'd like to hit on here right now is servant leadership and how you came about that one there.
Oh yeah. Okay, servant leadership. And look, there's been books written on this.
Oh,
You can go
tons.
on Google and you can find a lot of stuff on it. It's a philosophy. Okay, so and one of the guys that I love listening to and watching his videos is a guy named Simon Sinek,
Yep. Yep.
and he wrote his best book was actually his first one, the one Start with Why.
Mm-hmm.
But he's done some great stuff, and he talks about this same principle, and he calls it leaders eat last. And to me, if you're really going to take on the mantle of being the leader of your organization, you have to approach everything else from a servant perspective, meaning my job is to make sure that you have as much training as you can get to be the best you can be. My job is to find the resources to make you as successful as possible, because when you're the best you can be and you're as successful as possible, me and my company benefit from that.
You're like taking words right out of my mouth. I don't know. I've lost how many times I've basically said the exact same thing to my people. You know,
Well,
it's
and the beautiful part about that is people, when people understand that that's your philosophy and how you operate, and you demonstrate that every day, they bend over backwards to help you. They
yep.
work 2 and 3 times as hard as somebody else who might be under the whip, because you have a more authoritarian approach to leadership.
Mm-hmm. They know it's reciprocated, right? If I got to work a couple of extra hours tonight, then you know what? When the time push comes to shove, and I need to cut out a little early someday, well, you know what? The boss will be reciprocated to that, right?
Look, I've run into situations where people have immensely more marketability and could go elsewhere and make huge amounts of money based on their capabilities and their track record, but they choose to stay where they are because they just literally are in love with the person they work for.
They say, as they say, a person doesn't leave a job; they leave the boss.
Yeah, yes. And when they tell you they're going to leave, the pat answer is, "Oh, I got an offer that makes more money." No, they didn't go out looking for more money. More money was the default.
Yeah.
They left because they couldn't stand the person that was beating them up every single week, to hit the number, to do this faster, to do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole servant leadership, kind of mantra is change your approach as the leader and start letting people know that, well, let's face it, your people, forget about all the technology and all the other good stuff that's kind of leaked in over the last 20 to 30 years. Your people still end up being the most valued resource you have.
Oh, for sure.
And when you don't have good people, you know what that's like. It's a nightmare. It's like, do I have to go in and run this business today because I know what I'm heading into? And so get the right people and treat them well and challenge them and help them be the best performers they can be. It's like, well, look football. You watch football. The best teams, the teams that win the Super Bowl every year, the ones that come back year after year and get in the playoffs, it's because they've got the best people in every slot. And they believe in the organization and what the organization does, because the organization proves it can be a winner every single time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, yeah, servant leadership is such a topic, so close to me, and it's something I definitely embrace and recommend to everybody. And frankly, I truly believe that as a leader is what you are here to do. You're here to serve your people, give them the necessary tools to achieve what you want them to achieve on your behalf.
Yes.
And
so, look, you can take that philosophy down to the lowest levels of your organization. People that are in customer service, they can adopt that same type of principle, because the more that they can do, within parameters to serve the customer, the more that customer is going to resist the temptation of going someplace else because stuff's cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
We've all dealt with, gee, I'm going to go buy this because it's cheaper. And when you get it home and you try it, you realize why it's so cheap.
Yep, for sure.
So, don't give your customers reasons to go elsewhere. Treat them as best you can and make them really feel valued. Like the money they brought your way to do business with you meant so much to you. And when you do that, That's when people write reviews and recommendations on their own. You don't have to pester them for 2 months to get something out of them because they're in love with what you've done for them.
Mm-hmm. No, I wholeheartedly agree. It makes complete sense, and it blows my mind. And then I hear of leaders that don't have this type of mentality and don't enable their people. It really, boggles me completely. Well, Steve,
you have to really be centered in your ability to lead, and you can't take yourself too seriously either.
mm-hmm.
If you can do that, then sure. Are you going to get screwed here and there by people who don't have the right intention and stuff like that? Yeah, I mean that's just the law of averages. But by and large, if you maintain who you are and why you operate that way, you will attract and retain the right folks, and eventually your organization will be top notch, and things will work more right than they work wrong.
Makes complete sense. So the final thing I like to talk about here is at the back of the book, you have this great little self-assessment tool where you ask, the readers to go ahead and take a couple minutes and self-assess yourself on each of the different axioms. Just wondering if you can just go through that and provide some advice on how we can do that in the most objective way as possible, I should say.
Okay, so after you get done being exposed to certain principles, the people who are genuinely interested in developing themselves and always trying to be excellent and do better, you naturally start thinking, okay, how do I measure up? Where are my strengths? Where am I not doing well? And so I thought, all right, I'm not going to leave this book just at the principle 14 and then just drop it. I'm going to bring people to that next level and say, look, here are the 14 principles. Each one of these, rate yourself from 1 to 5. 1 being you're not doing really good, 5 you've mastered it, and rate yourself on all of those things. And then next to it, I said, do a priority listing, meaning not every one of these principles is going to be something that's immensely important to what you do. But if you prioritize them from 1 to 14, it will tell you which ones you need to be really focused on. So once you do the priority thing, then you point out, okay, let's say number 1, 2, and 3 for you was communications. Maybe it was, your authority level. Maybe it was, building trust. So if that was 1, 2, and 3, then go over and look at how you rated yourself and say, if I'm at a 3, can I take myself to a 4? If I'm at a 4, does it make sense for me to try to get to a 5? But it's just a very, very simple way to help people logically organize what they've just read and learned into something they can take action on.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And, set some goals and, as you said, manage them so you're not in the middle of January and gone nowhere, right?
Yes. And without adding too much to everybody's plate, when you look at the last page, it's that priority focus. So you've already picked the 3 priorities. Now just sit down and write one thing that you are going to do to take your game up.
Yeah.
So here's an example. I worked with a guy that was the general manager for a distribution facility in Kentucky. It was part of a big medical diagnostic corporation. They had plants all over the country. And this guy had just recently moved to this location and taken this role. And, he was struggling a bit. And so I worked with him. And one of the things that came out of the survey that was done was that people just felt that he wasn't approachable. So I said, tell me what you think you can do to change that without really doing any really complicated thing. What kind of activity could you do? So he thought about it and he says, well, one of the things I have a habit of doing is when I show up to work in the morning, he goes, I'm usually not the first person in there, but I'm getting there when everybody else is getting there. He goes, I just head right to my office, I shut the door, and I start working on my stuff because I want to make sure I get ahead of my stuff. And I said, so the first couple of minutes when everybody's getting set in and getting their coffee, you don't bother talking to anybody. You just head right to your office. He says, yeah. I said, well, what do you think everybody in your department is thinking about that? He says, well, they probably think I don't care because I'm not, jawing or. I said, okay, so try this. When you come in the morning, you don't have to meet all 23 people in the department, but just pick out 3 or 4 people and just go over and shake their hand and say, hey, how you doing this morning, Joe? Did you have a good weekend? or if you remember from talking to people that they have anniversaries or kids' birthdays, just say, hey, I remember you had a birthday this weekend. Did it go out? Did it go okay? And just ask one question to just kind of spur a little bit of conversation, and then move on to a few other people, and then head to your office. Now, whether people in your department got, the benefit of talking to you personally or not, that's going to make an impression in their mind that you genuinely care about people past them showing up and working for 8 or 10 hours a day.
Completely agree. In fact, one of the things I preach and what I do is that the first 30 minutes of my day is not spent in my office whatsoever. I walk in, drop my bag, jacket, whatever, grab my coffee and wander around and do exactly that. Talk to people, see, how was the game? What do you think about the game last night? Or, how was your weekend and night and stuff like that?
Yeah. I don't know if you ever heard of one of the early management gurus. He kind of had his fame back in the early middle 70s. His name was Tom Peters.
Okay.
Wrote a number of books. He actually coined the phrase management by walking around.
I never heard of that, but I like it.
Yeah, and that was his whole philosophy, was you can learn more about your organization by just getting out of your office and just walking around and just observing, asking people some questions. You're not out there to interrogate them or slam them because you don't think they're working hard or doing their best work. You go up to somebody in a certain area, like, maybe you have a newspaper company and you got people over in the graphics department. You go over there and say, hey, what are you working on now? And they might show you, say, oh, that's kind of cool. How'd you come up with that? So you're not really evaluating and giving people feedback they didn't ask for. You're simply starting conversations with questions. And if you spend half an hour a day just going around, checking people out and just genuinely being interested, but not being overbearing or in any way scary to people, you'd be amazed at what people will tell you.
Oh, for sure.
Tons. But you have to make it you have to put it high on your own priority list, that this is important to me to interface with people that are in this organization that are doing various things, many of them doing things I don't even know about. But get out there and just check them out and find out how they're doing. What I tell people is catch people doing things right.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And embrace that and build on that, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I do on a weekly basis is walk around my organization. So outside of the 30 minutes in the morning, my organization's fairly spread out. We're spread across 9 buildings, and some of them are fairly far apart. So every week, myself, my right hand man, we go out and we walk the lines, as we refer to it, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're getting out there and talking to people, shaking hands, see what they're doing, trying to catch them doing something good, and or if we know that they've done something good recently, walk up and say, hey, good job, or thank you for taking care of this, or whatever, right?
Yes.
And it truly makes a difference, and you get a vibe and you get the pulse of the organization and how people are doing, and you start getting good at reading people, and you're like, hey, how you doing? And they say, oh, I'm doing great, and you could immediately read the body language, like, no, that's not true. All right, what's going on here?
Yeah, and all of this stuff, as good as it is from a management practice standpoint, is really based on the idea that you as an individual, as the manager, as the owner, as the head guy in the organization, that part of what makes you is that you have a genuine sense of wanting to make sure that other people are doing their best. And if you feel that way and you think that way and you believe that, it will matriculate out to all parts of the organization. People will just come to understand that that's who you are. If you try to mask that or fake it, no, people see through that stuff. Eventually you're going to do something that's going to show your 2 stripes, and then it's going to, like, okay, well, we knew that he was always under there. We just were waiting for him to pop up. It's like whack-a-mole. And and then you lost it. Then your integrity's gone, and you don't have enough money to buy it back.
No, I can't think of a better way to start wrapping up this conversation, Steve. Those words are priceless, and anybody in any leadership role should definitely heed to them. Before we completely wrap up here, I got one last question I always ask my guests.
Sure.
And that is, to you, what makes a great leader?
To me, a great leader is someone who understands where he or she is in the organization in terms of their value. And they recognize that even though they've been fortunate enough to be in that pivotal role, that organization could not prosper, could not grow, could not run without the other people around them that many times work longer and harder for that success. And when you have that level of humbleness about you, it doesn't take away from who you are or your competency or your potential or anything like that. But when you have a kind of a humble approach that allows other people in, to me, those are the kind of people that you want to follow. You want to be in their space. You want to work for them, because those people will never do things intentionally to do you wrong or to put you in a situation where you're off track, or maybe you're not doing well in your job and you end up leaving or something like that. That's the height of trust to me.
No, those are great words. Steve, it was great having you on here with the Moving Forward Leadership podcast. What I'd like to do is turn the mic over to you now, and feel free to wrap up with any final thoughts you have. Shameless plug. How can people reach out to you, learn more? This is your time.
Well, you know what? When I get off of here, I'm going to go research where that term "shameless plug" came from, because everybody uses it, but who started that? Who came up? Okay, so here's mine. I work with people in ownership roles. They either own the business, they're operating the business, or they have a pivotal leadership role in an organization. And I work with them on these leadership techniques and managerial processes so they can operate at their own level of excellence. And so if people that are listening to this have a real interest in breaking the mold that's been kind of holding them in a circular pattern, or they never really feel like they've hit their best stride, then they need to reach out. They can go to my website, my phone number's all over it, they can send me an email. The book that we talked about, I have available on the website, so you can order it. It's not a huge expense. It's like $7. But it'll be the best $7 you ever spent. And so you can order it right on the website. I also have a podcast. Myself and a colleague of mine started the end of last year. It's called Business Wingmen. And it's a real hard-hitting 20-minute show once a week. And all we do is dive into stuff like we were talking about today and just tell people, look, if this is an issue for you, here's what you have to do to fix it. And that's all we're really doing, is we're giving people great ideas and strategies and tips so they can go out and try them on their own. And it's been a pretty good show far. We've had a great time doing it, and we're really looking forward to just continuing to deliver some great content. So, for those folks that listen to your show, if you're just not happy with where you ended up in your career and you want that help, you want somebody kind of in the background, kind of helping you guide yourself towards your own level of success, coaching is the best way to go. And I've got a great track record for it, and you can check all that stuff out because I put everything on the website, so you can see it all.
No, that's great. And for all the listeners out there, I'll have all these links and Steve's resources in the show notes. If you just go to movingforwardleadership.com/podcast/Smith, it'll be all in there. Steve, again, it was great having you on the show. I truly appreciate you taking the time to come out and talk to me and talk to my audience all about your leadership axioms. For the audience out there, just stand by. I'm going to go over my key takeaways from my interview today with Steve Smith. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. It was great being here.
Appreciate it. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that show there with Steve Smith regarding his leadership axioms. I thought it was really neat, his book and the way he wrote it and published it. You should definitely have a swing by his website and have a look at it and look at grabbing a copy for yourself. It's definitely easy to read. It won't take you long. In fact, this podcast probably is definitely longer than what it took me to read it, and we only touched half of the axioms in there. So just 3 key takeaways for the episode today. And the first one was, when do we learn how to be accountable to ourselves? And that was a really great question that he mentioned and posed, and really I don't even know the answer to, because I don't know if I've ever learned how to be accountable to myself. I kind of am. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with discipline, right? And you hear a lot of people talk about whether or not you're disciplined. Well, being disciplined is a form of being held holding yourself accountable. So just keep that in mind. The next one is, and I love this quote when he said it, learn from the past, live in the present, look to the future. And that is just complete truth. There's no false from that. You have to learn from your mistakes. You have to learn from what you did right. You have to be there in the present to make sure things happen. But as leaders, you have to be looking to the future. So keep that in mind. And then finally, the last key takeaway was do your best no matter the task, no matter how great, no matter how small. Make sure everything you do is to the best of your ability. Yeah, sure, we all have off days. 100%. I have my off days as well. But you know what? No matter if you're off or you're on your game, however you are that day, just make sure you're doing it to the best that you can at that time. And you'll get there, wherever there is for you. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you got some good takeaways from today. As always, if you enjoy the show, feel free to swing by your favorite podcast app or website and leave me a rating and review so that you can let others know to listen to me and all the guests that I bring on here. All right, it'd be really much appreciated. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have for today. Remember, keep pushing, keep trying, keep moving forward. Take care.